So if I step out for a month for a hand to heal or a wrist to heal, well, that's 4 weeks or 4 opportunities that someone else has to take my job. So again, it was always about the dream of the playing and playing for as long as I can and contributing for as long as I can more than anything. That was the goal for me, rather than I want to make money or whatever it is. And
in this episode, I'm joined by Nick Maxwell, Collingwood Football Club Premiership captain. It seems to me that as human beings, we tend to glamourise the achievements. We tend to glamourise the outcomes in the end and not place as much credence and importance on the hard work, the short-term sacrifices that are required to meet our longer-term goals. Nick's story is incredible, one of a huge innumerable amount of knockbacks and setbacks. Yet, Nick had the inner belief and the drive and the resilience to be able to forge a highly successful AFL career, and has translated a lot of his learnings as Premiership captain into his business ventures and into his leadership positions in various organisations like the Storm, GWS, and the Collingwood Football Club itself. This is a very exciting episode, one chock full of learnings. I'd love for your feedback. Please enjoy it as much as I did. All right, hello and welcome everybody to the It's Never About Money podcast. I'm joined by former Premiership captain with Collingwood, Nick Maxwell. Nick, how you doing?
very well, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Actually, we were just having a chat before, and I was kind of mentioning that it would be somewhat frustrating when, you know, someone knows of all your accolades and all your accomplishments. You've been a leadership coach with GWS, Storm and Collingwood. Now you're running your business venture, Eclat. And of course, the amazing premiership in 2010, which you were integral to. You know, there's so many things that happen behind the scenes to make this sort of situation happen. Perhaps you can talk to us a little bit about your journey, how you got there, and, you know, some of the tests and challenges that you faced along the way.
Yeah, it's a good point, mate. And I guess when I do my sort of leadership and culture talks to different groups and corporates, I talk about my own journey, but I ask them to be reflecting on theirs, because ultimately the people they're leading, they don't really care about me. So my story will last 24 hours, but if they're actually sharing their own experiences, that's the journey that the people they're leading are actually on. So I think it's important to always go back and think about the things that made you who you are. So look, for me, I grew up in Geelong, and from the age of 10, all I wanted to do was play AFL football. I remember in grade 5, we were sitting there with our teachers, and they asked us to do a plan A, plan B. So if you do anything you want in the world, what would it be? And plan B, if you couldn't do that, what's the next closest thing? So plan A, I wrote I want to be an AFL footballer, like many did. And then plan B, I wrote, if I can't be an AFL footballer, I want to play the highest level of footy I could, which at that age was play for St Joseph's Footy Club. They were all my heroes growing up, all the senior players there. I wanted to do well at school because my dad was a builder, my brother was into building, and I can't even hang a picture frame, so I know that I was never going to go down that path. And then the third thing was, even at that age, I wanted to have the ability to earn my own money and understand what money was about. So at the age of 10, we were on 5 acres out at Wallington, just near Ocean Grove, and we had a couple of cows that were keeping the grass down for us. And my brother and I'd go out with a wheelbarrow and we'd pick up all the cow poo and we'd bag it, and had the honesty system out the front, 50 cents a bag for manure. We made $3,500 in the first year and a half doing that as 10 and 8 year olds. So we understood the value of money and what it was all about. So for us, that was something that I guess was part of that plan B. So I guess I bounced between those two things the whole way through. So at under 12s, making a couple of good teams. So all of a sudden that plan A, you feel like you're on the right path and you're one of the better juniors around. And then you get cut from the team and go back. So in Geelong, unless you're part of the Geelong Falcons system, you're never seen as anyone who's going to be it and make it and be an AFL player. So First opportunity came at 14 years old for the under-15s. I was selected for the squad and to try out, which was about 100 odd kids. And each week they'd cut about 10, and the longer you hang around, the better chance you were, obviously. So I got down to the night before they announced the squads, after we'd gone from 100 to 90 to 80 to 70 and got all the way down, and I got cut. So you're back into plan B. All right, well, keep working, try harder. At this stage, I was working at KFC for a few bucks an hour as a trainee, and playing the highest level of footy I could, which was at St Joey's, and working hard at school. And then the next year got invited back to the Falcons again. So right, plan A's back on. This is the pathway you need to be on. Again, went through the same process and got cut. So you're back to plan B. As a 16-year-old, I got invited back to the Falcons again. So the dream's back on, plan A. Got cut, so back to plan B. So 3 strikes. I guess that AFL dream wasn't looking too good.
By the way, Nick, how are you getting cut? I mean, what's happening there when they're actually telling you? Who's letting you down, and what are they saying?
Just the coach or the regional manager. They basically just say, look, this is a squad. They'll give you a little bit of individual feedback as well about things you can work on, and you go away and go back to your local club and work on those things. So the door's never shut in those situations. It's always, we're going to keep an eye on you, we've got people watching you, etc. So that's always good to know that there's someone there. But it's a challenge in that you never know when they are there. So you have to stay up and you have to be always doing your best, because you might have 5 great games and then they show up for the one game that you have a poor one, and all of a sudden that's what they see is the poor one. So it's just always about being on, I guess. So at 16, I was invited actually to start training with the senior players at St Joey's, they were my heroes. Like, we didn't have social media at that stage. It was a Friday night game and a Saturday night game. So growing up in Wallington, barracking for Hawthorn, which were Waverley Park. So we're talking a 5.5, 6 hour round trip if we were going to watch a game, and plus the game itself. So my heroes were the senior players at St Joey's, and they asked me to start training with them. So for me, it was a bit of a sink or swim. It was, you need to improve a lot because I don't want to let my heroes down. And I improved a lot because I did a lot of work with them and trained at a higher level with them. And they were great for my development. I played one senior game. We lost by 120 points, and I got dropped the next week. It wasn't all my fault, but
probably felt like it was your fault.
It did. So I was dropped, but it was a great experience. As I said, they helped improve me and lift my level. I got invited back down to Falcons again as a 17-year-old, and because I'd been doing all this extra training, so I was training under 18s, then I was training with the seniors, and I was doing a lot of stuff in between. There was an hour in between before those one ended and the next one started. So I'd improved a lot. I got super fit. So I was winning a lot of the time trials at the Falcons as a 17-year-old. Was getting great feedback. And then we got in the first practice match, and I picked up the ball 3 minutes in, handball to a teammate, and went to put on a shepherd, and a guy jumped and stuck his knee in my back and snapped a vertebrae in my spine. So I was out for 6 months while that recovered. So I got cut for a 4th time. So you work through the recovery of that injury and get back to plan B and doing what you can to be the best you can be in plan B. I won a premiership with St Joey's under 18s end of that year, but the hardest part was I watched the Falcons win the premiership on the MCG on AFL Grand Final day. And I was watching guys who I was competing with, many of whom I was beating in that pre-season, and just frustrated that I felt like I was good enough and I just couldn't get that opportunity. I just needed the breaks to go my way. So just kept focused and on that drive of wanting to make it, and got back to the Falcons and tried out for a 5th time the next year, and got to the end of the pre-season. I made the squad, played every game that year in the team, and we had a pretty good team. We had Luke Hodge, Gary Ablett, Jimmy Bartell, Brent Maloney, Tom Davidson, Tim Callan, Joel Reynolds, Luke Vogels, Luke Molan.
Wow.
We had about 13 guys from the one team end up on an AFL list, and amongst all of them, I won best player in finals when all the recruiters are watching. So all of a sudden, plan A was on. I had all these clubs coming and interviewing me, interviewing my parents. What I didn't know at the time was they were interviewing my school teachers, my principal, my coaches, because it wasn't social media back then, as I said. So you're not going through and finding out what type of person it is. You actually had to go and speak to them. And all of a sudden I thought, how good's this? I'm a chance of this plan A. And the draft came and went. I didn't get drafted, but the next day I had 8 clubs ring me up for a rookie list position and wanted me to train with them. So I sat down with the coach and the GM and we went through the 8 and worked out what the best one was for me personally, and decided Port Adelaide was the one. It was because they had ageing defenders. They had to start bringing through some youth, and then also for me to show my commitment to them that I was prepared to move interstate to chase my AFL dream would show how much it meant to me. So I packed up. I was supposed to be there a week. So I got there first day, met the coach. I went in to do my medical with the doctor, and I've been carrying a groin injury the second part of the year, and I had some scans, and he put the scans up in the wall and he goes, "Mate, we can't draft you. You got osteitis pubis. This injury, we can't fix this injury." So I've gone from how good's this, like AFL club, this is amazing, to we can't take you. So the coach came in, the GM came in. There was literally the 4 of us around this table, and Choco, the coach, Choco Williams, wanted me. The doctor was saying we don't know how to treat this injury, and the GM was stuck in between, not knowing what to do, and he ended up sided with the doctor, which is understandable in those circumstances. So I managed to convince him to let me stay for the week, and I was just like, okay, I'm not going to be here, but this is where I want to be, so I need to take in as much as I can, ask as many questions as I can. I was watching Kane Corns and Chad Corns and Treadray and Primus and all these guys who were the best players in the game, and how they trained, how they did weights, taking notes, asking questions. I got back on the Saturday from there, and I knew Hawthorn, they were one of those 8 teams originally, and they'd just taken Luke Hodge with pick 1, and he had osteitis pubis really badly. So obviously they didn't have a fear of it. So I rang him up and told him the circumstances, and they said, "Come train with us." So I went down there and spent a month training with them. Got to the day before the rookie draft, and I sat down with the recruiting manager, and he said, "There's 4 of you, and there's only 2 spots. In order of priority, number 1 is John Baird, number 2 is Nick Stone, number 3 was myself, and number 4 was Michael Georgiadis." And he said, "The Kangaroos have a pick before we do, so we think they're going to pick John Baird. If that happens, we'll take Stone and you." So all of a sudden I was thinking, okay, plan A's back on. How good's this? The club I grew up barracking for, Hodgie's already there, who's my teammate. Draft came, and the Kangaroos picked John Baird. Hawks picked Nick Stone, and with their next pick, they picked Michael Georgiadis. And I only found out after I'd finished my career. I was commentating for Channel 7, and I walked in the lift at the MCG and walked straight into the recruiting manager and said, "Look, things worked out pretty well for me, but what actually happened?" And he just said that Michael had been training with Box Hill, or playing with Box Hill, which was Hawthorn's reserves. So the coach at the time had seen a lot of him, and he'd never seen anything from me, and just a sliding doors moment where he decided to make that call and go with him. So again, from there, once the rookie draft's over, your next opportunity is not for another year. So I'm back to plan B. So plan B was the highest level footy I could play, which was VFL football. So I had to work out how to play at a VFL team. Mm-hmm. And I got into university at double degree in Ballarat. So what aligned with that was North Ballarat Roosters had a VFL team that didn't have an AFL alliance. And then obviously the money element, where I worked at the Complete Garden selling fountains and pots and that type of thing, garden equipment.
So I'm just thinking, like, you know, there's a couple of themes that I wanted to explore today, and they're interesting. They feel like there's a bit of a crossover between both, Nick. So the idea of having vivid dreams and an imagination, if that's the right term, for where you want to get to, and then that intersecting with the capacity to have the resilience. So I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like without having that strong clarity around what the future might look like for you, having that faith in yourself, then the resilience side to be able to deal with all the knocks and all the rest of it is compromised somewhat. Is that true? Do they both go hand in hand?
Absolutely. And I think it's for everyone, and hopefully everyone listening can relate to that, is that there's no straight line to success. Like every single day, I go like this every single day. There's great things happen, and then something I've got to deal with, and then something great happens, and it just goes like that. So my biggest fear at the moment, I've got 3 kids, 12, 10 and 7, and I just feel the generation coming through at that age that the resilience just isn't there. Like I say to my 7-year-old, how was your day? I had the greatest day ever. This happened. And I was all right. Here's dinner. You ready? And I put dinner down. He goes, oh, I don't like this. This is the worst day ever. And it's like, like seriously, you just said it was the greatest day ever. If what's for dinner is going to throw you off, like, how are you going to go when something bad actually happens? So I think you need a pathway on where you want to go. You need to understand that it's not going to be smooth sailing. And ultimately, all those setbacks and challenges will show you how much it actually means to you. Because you can say you want to do something and say you want to achieve something, but if you're thrown off course by little things all the time, then you'll give up on it pretty quick. It doesn't mean that much to you. So you'll find out in the moments of when you feel like desperation and you feel failure, that's when you'll work out how much it really means to you. And so
that makes a lot of sense. And just coming back to the sort of younger generation, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but anecdotally, I feel like we're in a bit of an era where some of our challenges and our past, let's call them traumas, because everyone does call them that. And of course, there are some genuine traumas, and there are probably some on the lighter end of the scale as well. But, you know, it seems like we focus on these things as being a reason why we don't move forward, rather than them being an impetus or a reason on why we do go forward. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, so with my kids, what I try to talk to them about is when something's gone wrong, I say, well, how do you feel about that? How does that make you feel when you failed a test, or when you haven't played well in sport, or you've lost a game, or anything like that? How does that make you feel? And so they go, okay, what makes me feel bad? All right, okay, what do we need to do to make sure you don't feel that way again? Well, if it's a test for school, for maths, then I want to study harder and be better prepared, so next time I achieve better in that test. So it's actually going backward and forward on it, and also trying to explain that failing a test, the world's not going to end. A test is called a test for a reason. A test is so they find out what level you're at. So as school has so much resource and so much time with you, they might have to put more resource into a certain subject for you because that's something you're struggling with or you need to be better at. So I think it's also breaking it down to those feelings of trying to get them to understand that's part of that journey, I guess.
And it strikes me as well that we kind of live in an era, maybe because of tech and social media, that there's a sort of it's glamorous to show and indicate what the visions are, what the achievement of these specific goals, but it's not as glamorous to show the toil and the hard work and the implementation and the costs of doing the hard work in the short term. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And that's also why I was asked to write an autobiography. And I said, I'm not going to write one the traditional way. I actually want to write one that's aimed at 10 to 16-year-olds that actually shows more about my journey with more photos, easy to read, because I feel like I can have a bigger impact on them than what I can a business person. So although now I spend a lot of time obviously working with business people and working from a leadership capacity on teaching different ways to lead and different ways to bring teams together, etc. But in that instant, I felt like it was a great opportunity to be able to do that. So I even dropped a couple of boxes off to the school that my kids go to because one of the early conversations I had with the teacher was around, I can't get the boys to read. And I was like, well, all right, they all love their sport, they all love their footy, so let's try this. And hopefully those lessons help them. And I'd have kids coming up in the schoolyard or at school pickup or drop off and saying, oh, I saw when you did this or you did this. And I mean, I'd retired by the time most of these kids even knew what football was. So the fact that they can actually sort of relate to you and come up and ask questions about it, and you can see some of those things sinking in, I guess that just sort of helps, and you feel good about handing down some of that knowledge, I guess.
Just before we continue with your journey, because I know there's a little bit more there that we really, well, a lot more that we want to discuss. But I think some of the knockbacks that you've experienced to this point of the story, it would be okay to think that someone would throw the towel in at that particular point in time. Like it seems reasonable with the amount of knockbacks that you got. But firstly, are there times where it is okay to throw the towel in? when is it okay? And yeah, like, tell us a little bit about how you were able to have the momentum to keep going forward.
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess as a teenager, I mean, when I had some success in football, my parents were interviewed about that, and they were saying that because they wear every bump that you wear as a kid, but probably worse because they feel like they want to help and they're not sure how to help. And they said, we don't know how he kept going with it. We don't know how he kept going through the setbacks. And as a teenager, I mean, I wasn't that developed in my own mind to understand what I was going through. I can just look at reflection and go, well, I did see a lot of people give up. I did see a lot of people say, nah, enough's enough, I don't want to do it. But for me, it meant so much to me. I wanted it so badly that I didn't get to that point. But I was 19 and a half when I finally did get to an AFL club, which we'll get back to in a second. But who knows, if that was dragged out to 21 or 22, I may have lost that capacity to continue that drive and might have focused more on plan B. So there's also those sliding doors moments where you do get an opportunity, you need someone to believe in you. And even now in business, I'm looking for people to hire at different stages, and we hire for character, initiative and work ethic, and we work through those three things. If you tick those three boxes, we feel like we can teach you just about anything beyond that, but only if you've got those three attributes. So we want great people who want to work hard, who want to invest in us and in our business and in our members and the people that we're here to serve as a business. So for me, I think that if you go back to that drive and supporting people and someone who believes in you, everyone needs that at some stage and at critical times in their life. And I was lucky enough to have that many times, even from the Geelong Falcons perspective. Mick Turner was the GM of football, Damien Christensen was the coach, and those two guys believed in me when many others wouldn't and kept pushing me forward. And I Jared Fitzgerald at the Roosters at North Ballarat believed in me when a lot of others wouldn't. So you need those support structures around you.
And do you think that, coming back to now your new business venture, well, I don't know whether you consider it new, but semi new, it hasn't been around for ages. Yeah. Do you see some similarities in the challenges, the roadblocks, the things that you have to navigate through in business and what you actually had to go through to get to an AFL club?
Yeah, I do. There's obviously challenges in any new business or in any business total, particularly in a new one, as you're trying to establish it. And I guess working with my staff, it's a lot about understanding that there's going to be challenges. It's not all going to be smooth sailing. And in a more established business, you have more of an even keel as you go along. There's obviously going to be little ripples along the way, but in a new business, those hits and those ripples can feel a lot, they can almost be scarring at different stages if you let them be. So you need to actually have the capacity to understand the world's not going to end and that we're going to be all right, and that believe in your product and believe in your people. And if you do those two things, then you're going to come out the other end. And so for us, that's our driving force, and our directors and senior managers around that is to keep focused on what we can control. And that's all we ever did in sport was what's in our control, because the ball's going to bounce the wrong way and you had no say in that. And people are going to say things about you. You've got no say in that. All you can do is worry about what's in your control. And I guess for me, from a sporting perspective, I was never nervous for a game in my life. And people think, how the hell is that possible? Like grand final day, 100,000 people. And it was because I knew my role. I knew the game plan. I knew the opposition's game plan. I knew how we had to adjust to it. I knew I'd eaten the right foods. I'd prepared. I'd done the training. I knew all those things. So I can't ask any more of myself leading into that game. Sometimes you're just going to get beaten in a contest, in a game, in a season. Those things are going to happen. So for me, it was more, well, if I wouldn't have changed anything in the lead up, then I can't ask any more of myself. So again, from our perspective, when we're working with clients, if we get to the point where we didn't land a deal or we didn't land a client for whatever reason, you go back and review that. Why didn't we land them? What would we have done differently? And if you go through that process, you either take lessons out of it that help make sure the next one you can land, or you go, all right, well, it just wasn't meant to be. And I think that you can spend too much time beating yourself up over missing out on certain things, rather than just taking the lessons, understanding it's just part of the journey.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think as well, I just want to, the backdrop, you've talked about money a few times as well. And I know we're about to enter the story of how you actually, made it onto an AFL list. And so, money is a backdrop that sits there. And I know that, it wasn't like you were in a particularly fortunate position and you did have many different jobs and trying to make ends meet as you were going along your footballing career and journey. So could you explain a little bit about what considerations did you think about money as being super important to you at the time? Was it a factor in decision around career? Did you feel risk averse? Was it were you kind of fearful of not being able to make it and then not being able to make it financially in that sense? Like, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, not at all. I never thought about football as in I never had football and financial together. I never ever thought about the financial element. It was just about what I wanted to do with my life, basically. So, and the lead up to that, the financial element was just for what I needed. So the early stuff was about I wanted a car. I wanted to be able to buy a car. So I saved up a lot of KFC money to be able to buy my first Mitsubishi Magna 1996. So that was what I wanted, because I wanted the freedom to be able to drive my car and do that. And then I wanted to be able to go to the movies with my friends or whatever it was. So that's why I worked. When I got to Ballarat, I was at the Complete Garden. I was at the Lakeview Hotel pouring pots at night. I did yard duty for kids at Ballarat and Clarendon College. And I got paid $150 a game to play VFL footy. I would have played VFL footy for free. But those things were all, that many jobs wasn't for experience. That was to pay the bills. Because then I'd moved out of home. You got rent, you got electricity, you got gas, all that thing. You want to socialise. You got to put food on the table. So that was more a means to an end. That was just to make ends meet. I was doing university at the time, a double degree, as I said. So I was busy, had one of the best years of my life. Met a lot of lifelong friends there. But again, coming back to the end of the season, Geelong Footy Club rang me up and they invited me down to train with them. They wanted me to train for a rookie list position. So all of a sudden I'm back to plan A. So I'm down there training for a month with them and got to the day before the rookie draft, and Bomber Thompson called me in his office and sat me down and said, "We're not going to draft you and we're not going to rookie you." And I was just another setback. And I said, "Why? What have I wasted a month for?" And he said, "We want you to play in our top-up list," which effectively means they've got 44 in the AFL list, 22 playing the AFL, the rest playing the VFL. There's injuries, suspensions, so you top up from the rest of that list. So if everyone was available, I'd be back playing at St Joey's, which I love, my club, I love it. But I was already playing VFL at North Ballarat. So I said, "Mate, that makes no sense to me. I'm already playing VFL football. I can't get pushed out by an AFL player coming back from injury. I've got jobs, I've got university up there. Like, why would I do that?" And he said, "Well, you'll be right under our nose. Like, we'll be seeing you every day, skinny kid, so you'll be in our weights program. We can bulk you up and we'll look at you for next year." And I said, "I appreciate the offer, but it just doesn't make sense to me." And he said, "Well, if you walk out that door, that'll be it. Your AFL dream will be over." And I said, "Look, hopefully I'll prove you wrong." And I left, and I was gutted because, again, you feel like it's all over and you missed another opportunity. This was about 4 days before Christmas. So the next day, as I'm still going through that process, I was catching up with all my mates from school for a Christmas beer, because obviously I'd been away at Ballarat, and Mum was driving me in and from Wellington, and I got to Leopold and I had a text message from a mate and it said, "Well done the draft." So I looked at it and confused, and I read it out to Mum, and she pulled across 3 lanes of traffic and almost killed us, and she's going, "Ring him, ring him, ring him." And I rang him up and I said, "Mate, was that meant for someone else?" And he said, "Nah, Collingwood picked you." I said, no, I haven't spoken to Collingwood for 18 months, so they wouldn't have picked me, and if they had, I'd know about it. And he said, "Oh, it's on the computer screen in front of me." And I was sort of going back and forth. I'm like, maybe it was a projection or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm on my way in. I'll see you soon, and we'll catch up. So I hung up the phone and confused, and I had 4 voicemail messages. I'm like, what is going on here? And the first one said, "This is Noel Judkins, recruiting officer from Collingwood. I want to welcome you to the club." was a couple of hours late heading to the time we were supposed to be at the pub, and I just thought my mates grabbed some old guy from the pub and left a voicemail for me thinking it'd be funny. So I deleted it.
Oh my God.
Went down the second one and said, "This is Mick Malthouse from the Collingwood Footy Club." I'm like, "Yeah, bullshit," and I deleted that too. Went to the third one, and it was Peter Lenton, who's my player manager and accountant, and still to this day a close friend of mine. And he's going, "In beauty, how good's this?" and screaming down the phone. And I thought maybe this is real. And the fourth one was Nathan Buckley, who was the captain of the club, and so that's how I found out I got there. So it was. Finally, I guess the breaks went my way and someone believed in me. Noel Judkins and his team believed in me. And you talk about money, I got to the club, I was on $18,000 before tax. So I couldn't live off what I was on. So every Thursday was a day off. So I worked at Telstra from 8 till 6. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, I'd go into schools and talk with different programs that the club ran for like $150 to do that. So again, the money was about trying to make ends meet, but it was a foot in the door for AFL, and I spent all my time at Williamstown playing down there. We won a premiership down there, and I was lucky enough that those players supported me and pushed me and guided me and coached me, and I got a second contract, another 1-year contract the next year, where I went on to 25 grand. So I dropped Telstra, and then sort of halfway through that year, began playing and was lucky enough to play for the next sort of 10, 12 years.
It's a beautiful illustration, Nick. It's just an incredible illustration of, it's not about money for you. It wasn't about money for you. It was about how hard you worked to get to a particular position, how fixated you were on being able to make it. How I think even in this episode so far, you may have said back to plan A 5 or 6 times. Yeah. There's a very strong parallel between how I even feel about my business, which I've been in with my brother James for near on 15 years, and working together with him and then toiling and having the challenges and making a mistake here and there with business, and then wondering whether it's going to work and when it's going to work, and then all of a sudden getting to the realization, hey, we've just actually made an amazing inroad into this particular niche client, whatever it is that is important. And so you've just illustrated, I think, for a lot of family businesses as well out there, the kind of struggle and the challenge, and then the momentous occasion when you've actually been able to get and achieve something that seems almost insurmountable at one point in time.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also, just during my AFL career, I broke 32 bones and had 11 surgeries. So it's not all smooth sailing. And that's probably not...
How many bones in the body there, Nick?
Oh, yeah. I tried to get through as many as I could. But even then, so I played with broken hands and broken wrists and broken fingers and broken nose, as you can tell just looking at the screen. I played with those things because I didn't ever want someone to take away my position in the team. So if I step out for a month for a hand to heal or a wrist to heal, well, that's 4 weeks or 4 opportunities that someone else has to take my job. So again, it was always about the dream of the playing and playing for as long as I can and contributing for as long as I can more than anything. That was the goal for me, rather than I want to make money or whatever it is. And there was only actually one time where I had to really consider thinking about leaving, and it was a monetary offer, which was, and I'll tell you, Richmond was $1 million over 3 years, and Collingwood offered me 400 over 2. And I was sort of at a dead end with Collingwood in that negotiation. And I went back to them, I said, sign me for 250 over 1. So instead of this $1 million over 3, it's 250 over 1. And they said, no, we want to sign you for 2 years. And I said, no, I want 1 million over 250 over 1 year. And I'm going to prove to you that I'm worth more than you think I'm worth. And this is how I'm going to do it. And
so Nick, this was not necessarily, was this about the financial side of it, or your worth to the club?
I felt it was about worth, but it was also a little bit about financial. Like obviously I'd been on such little money for my first sort of 3 to 4 years that it also, at some stage, understanding the position I'm in, that I was never one of the star players. I just felt it was way unders, particularly when you look at how another team was valuing me. So when another team's valuing me here, what does that say? So for me, the decision to stay at 250 over 1 was actually, I'm going to prove to you, because A, I owe it to the Collingwood Football Club because you believed in me when no one else did. And B, I'm going to prove my worth to you. And I had a really good year and got a better contract beyond that. So it was also a loyalty factor. But also I've always had a chip on my shoulder, I guess, until sort of midway through my career, when I was like probably my first year as captain. I was all Australian, second to best and fairest. That was, up until that point, my whole career, and what I did was about proving people wrong. And then after that, it was about proving people right, the ones who did believe in me. So I had this chip on my shoulder about, you don't trust me, you don't believe in me, you don't think I'm good enough, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then I hit this.
So Nick, and superficial awareness of Mick Malthouse's sort of strategy seemed to be sort of like us against them sort of mentality. Is that why there was a great alignment with you and Mick in terms of your personal drive, in terms of you're that type of person that said, I'll prove you wrong. I'll take this challenge and I'll show you. And it sort of seems to be aligned with what Mick was about.
Yeah, for sure. And Mick's greatest strength was he'd work out. So I talked about that journey that's not a straight line, but he'd sit down with young players and he'd go, right, this was a challenge and then this was a good part, and he'd go through that and he'd work out what were the triggers for you as an individual for you to go up here. So he'd work out what buttons you need to press. So for me, he knew it was, you're not good enough, you're not contributing, and he'd go really hard at me because he knew I'd grit my teeth and go, I'll show you, don't you dare say that about me. And that was my response. So, and I didn't work this out until obviously a lot later in my career, when you actually think about it and have conversations with him. But there's other players that he would never do that to because he knew he'd lose them. So he'd more take them off the side, put his arm around them, and go through that process. So, he worked out which buttons to press, which is obviously a leadership lesson in itself. So, but that's sort of, again, that's what it's all about, is having those type of people around you. So proving people wrong for me got to a certain point, but then I guess I was mature enough and confident enough in who I was and what I was contributing as a player and as a teammate and as a team member to be able to flip it the other way and go, right, now I'm going to prove people right. So now I don't really care about the doubters anymore and the haters. I care about the people that do believe in me and making sure I do the right thing to prove they were right in backing me, in making me captain of a big club when beyond the time I was actually probably ready, in backing me to lead the team, in backing me to play, to pull on this jumper every week. So I sort of
that's a different framing, isn't it? I mean, that's a different framing around proving people wrong versus proving those that you care about and respect their opinion right.
Correct. Yeah, and that's sort of, you got to teach people that as well, particularly in something like AFL footy or sport or anything that's where you've got doubters, is what's your motivation? And you come back to your motivation, and a lot of that motivation I had was all those setbacks was, I'll prove you wrong, I'll show you, I'll come back. And I was, when I'm running around doing extra training and having shots on goal in the park and all those type of things, I'm putting myself in a position of thinking about what those people were saying about me and thinking about the ones that are making it, what are they doing? And in the off season when I'm training, I'm going to do another lap because I know no one else is. So I'm going to go for a run on Christmas morning because I know most people won't be. So it's about how can I get those little wins along the way? And that was just my mindset of trying to, I guess, meet those goals and drive.
So coming back to your original point, you actually got, you challenged yourself. I think part of the contract negotiation was you being able to be in the top tier within the best and fairest, I believe.
Yep.
Is that correct?
It is, yep.
And so you're able to meet that and move forward.
Yeah, so it was around, that next negotiation was around, I basically said, long story short, take out all the these type of bonuses and these markers that every player has, and just put in the real top end ones, which is sort of top 5 best and fairest stuff and things that no one ever thought I could achieve at that stage. And I said, bump all them up and get rid of the ones that are a lot easier to hit, and managed to hit all those markers and earned, I guess, a better contract the next year.
And as a young man, I believe you actually went into that negotiation by yourself. You basically said to your player agent, Peter, let me do this, and you just went in and did it.
Yeah, I was just sort of, I had a great relationship with the GM, and I guess I wanted to get a different perspective as well, because you always sort of let your manager do it and trust Pete with my life. Still to this day, he manages all my stuff. But it was more about, I want to sit in and be part of a negotiation and feel like that, understand what that's like. I only did it that one time. Outside of that, he handled everyone, but it was more a matter of, we're not quite hitting the mark. I want to try something different and have a crack at it.
So I don't know where you want to go exactly now with this, but I was thinking, obviously, you were playing, you were becoming quite successful in your own right as a player, and obviously at some point in time you were given the news that by Bucks, I believe, that he might give you the number 5 Guernsey, and then also the captaincy position was bestowed upon you. Do you think that there was a lot of expectation thrust on you? Did you feel deserving? What did you learn about leadership through that particular period?
There was certainly no expectation on me, because no one ever thought I was that good. So I guess from the number 5 was, we're on a plane to Vegas, Bucks and I, in our off season. So with a few other guys, and he just turned to me and said, look, he was retiring, and said, I'd love you to take my Guernsey, number 5. And I was like, mate, no way. Like, you're Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time. I certainly don't deserve that. And he just said, look, these are the attributes you bring. This is why I admire you, and this is why I'd like you to do it. And I sort of had to think about it and came back and said, well, he's had a big influence on my career, and out of respect for him, I'll take it on. So that was the first year. And then from there, I guess the leadership thing, Bucks and James Clement were actually the two that saw leadership in me. I never got taught leadership. I never was in any of the development groups or anything. And they said to me, I want you to nominate for leadership group, well before I was ready. And I was like, why? Like, I'm barely getting a game. I'm not a leader. And then they said, well, what do you think a leader is? And they sort of described what they saw in me, that you're always on time, you work your backside off, you help your teammates, you're disciplined and determined in how you go about it, you go above and beyond in your own body to try and get yourself right. That's what leadership is. You're teaching people, you're leading by example, you're guiding them, you're supporting them. And because I'd never been taught leadership, I guess it worked well for me, because I just did what I thought came naturally to me, like what I thought was right was what leadership was. So I guess because I never had any preconceived ideas, then that helped me. And the only real time where after the first few games of my career, I got suspended in about the second or third game for a hip and shoulder. And I sat down with Mick, and he goes, mate, all I want you to remember is that you've been named captain because of who you are, not who we want you to be. It's because of who you are. You're already doing what we want you to do. So don't try and be extra physical or be extra over the top or anything like that. Just be you, because that's why we picked you. We didn't pick you hoping you're going to be something else or someone else. So that was probably the only real, I guess, advice that stayed with me along those lines of be yourself and believe in who you are and continue to develop and continue to grow and continue to get feedback from people, but don't change in essence who you are.
I was just thinking about the shift from being self-focused and being aware of your own performances and being aware of, you talked about as an example before the inner talk around how you have to, prove people wrong and the rest of it. Does that shift from that sort of mentality into okay, I care now more about the performance of those others around me and how I'm impacting? Is there a kind of evolution or kind of natural step to that?
I think what we've learnt over the last probably 10 years in particular, particularly in sport, is that just because you're a superstar player doesn't mean you're going to make a great leader. And you see it in management all the time where there's someone who's great at their job gets promoted in a leadership position and then they fail in that position because it's a completely different skill set. Like they're not even close to being aligned. So doing your job and doing it well is one thing. Being able to, I guess, open yourself up on a more macro level and understand leading and managing and all that above that is completely different. So there's been a million failures of that, and I think we've learned more and more about leadership is that for me, you don't, just because you're great at your job, don't feel like you have to become, the next step doesn't have to be leadership and management. You can just be great at your job and your contribution to the organisation is significant. And we fell into the trap of a long time, particularly, as I said, in sport, of best players are captain. And sometimes they are, but more often than not, they're not. And so I think that your capacity to take on extra things and also you don't have to have a title to be a leader, which we hear a lot. But I remember sitting with the Melbourne Storm guys early on, the emerging leaders that I work with right at the start, and I said, who showed leadership today? It was early in the morning and they all sort of looked around and didn't say anything. And I said, well, you have. And I pointed out to one of them and he sort of was a bit embarrassed and shocked. And I said, you were having a coffee this morning at a cafe on Swan Street, weren't you? And he said, yeah, I was. And I said, I was parked at the lights opposite you and there's a little old lady who was walking towards with a frame, walking towards the door, and she couldn't stay on the frame and open the door and get through at the same time. And I said, you leapt out of your chair, ran the 10 metres over the door, opened the door for her, helped her through, and then closed the door and then went and sat down. I said, mate, that's leadership. That's community leadership right there. And I said, beyond that, so there's 20 people who saw that, who are embarrassed that they didn't jump up and do it. And next time, they will because of what you just did. Because how you made them feel because you got up and did it. And also you're wearing the Melbourne Storm logo right here. So that's who we are in the community and what we want to be about. So when everyone talks about leadership, they think it's this inspiring speech or something, or come with me, or this massive moment. And that's one of 100 and one in 100. So the other 99 is jumping out of your seat to go and open the door for the lady that couldn't get through. And it's recognising the body language of one of your workmates or colleagues who doesn't quite seem right today. So just grabbing him and taking him aside and just going, I just want to check in. I noticed you're a bit down today. Is everything okay? I'm always here if you want to grab a coffee and have a chat. Just little moments like that. There's way more of them than there is inspiring speeches and massive moments. So try and be as good as you can in all those little moments, and don't put yourself in this situation where I have to do the big inspiring speech. Because for a lot of people, Jerry Seinfeld says it, that there was a study done over in the States where he goes, the people's number one fear was getting up and talking in front of a crowd. And number two was death. And he goes, how is death number two? That means if you're going to be at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
Exactly.
And it's so true, is that we build ourselves up and to do these things, and it's not for everyone getting up and talking in front of a crowd and being able to explain things and do that. It's a different skill set again. So it doesn't mean that you're not a great leader.
No.
So there's leaders who I worked with who never had a title, who were never in the leadership group, who could never get up and talk in front of a group, that was as important to the teams I worked in and what we did and our success than I was. And I was the captain.
It sounds like, the lesson here is to be self-reflective and work out what are your innate qualities and be honest to those innate qualities to allow them to flourish. And whatever you will end up being, whether it be a leader or any other label or category that we tend to assign to these things, you will be. Does that?
It is, but it's even more importantly, quite often, mate, we don't recognise those things in ourselves.
Yes.
So it's actually the most important thing is that the leader can actually look at every person in their team and every person they work with and give them the feedback that I saw what you did there and I really appreciate that. You contributed to our team by doing that just then.
Do you think
I
that's
know
why
that-
it was really important for Mick to actually identify and use some of the qualities that you maybe didn't even completely realise yourself, or did you already know you had them?
No doubt, 100%. And for James Clement and Bucks to point that out to me a few years before that. So for me, early on in my career, about my fifth game, I ran back with a flight of the ball, which I'd sort of never really been known for, and ran into a guy called Alistair Lynch, who's about 30 kilos heavier than me, and
Scary dude.
Greatest players of all time. And I got crunched, but I spoiled the ball out of bounds and hit the ground. Sort of realised that I wasn't hurt, stood up, and all my teammates came to me and made me feel like 10 foot tall. I was like, oh, how good is this? They were like, no, like that was unbelievable. And I was like, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do that again as many times as I can because of how they made me feel. And that was one moment that I carried with me. And then, so whenever I see behaviour that I appreciate or that I love or that inspires me or that I want to see more of, I tell people. I call it out because I know how I felt in that moment. So I want them to feel the same way. So it's just being able to make people feel appreciated, make them feel like they're contributing and they're important to the team, and that all those little things don't go unnoticed. And I think that if you keep pointing them out, then you'll keep seeing that behaviour.
You know, one of the things that I really wanted to chat to you, and I'm mindful of our time, obviously, but you know, we could probably have three episodes easy, Nick, the way we're going. But just the due diligence, the studying of the opposition that I've heard you speak about before, and how far you were prepared to go. It's almost like I was listening to you talk about your assessment of the forward line of the Hawthorn Football Club at the time, and it almost felt like a SWOT analysis. And so I wouldn't mind you just going through the lengths that you took, because you've said that you weren't the most talented footballer on the planet, but you went to the nth degree to know and study the opposition. And I thought there's a lesson to be learnt in that for business even.
Yeah, and I guess it's also to be able to pass on knowledge to my teammates around that. So I'd often get asked who's the best player you ever played on, and the best player at one stage I wasn't a key defender. I was sort of a more played on other players, and all our key defenders were out one night, so I had to play on Buddy Franklin, and it was a year that he kicked over 100. So in Hawthorn's one of their dominant teams, and Buddy's quicker than me, bigger than me, stronger than me, better than me. So I was like, right, how do I just get a few more percentages back in my favour? So that was, I knew that he didn't like marking over the top of anyone at this stage. He liked to get you on a lead. So I'd go and stand 15, 20 metres in front of him and try and cut the angles, because if I just made it a speed race, he'd beat me every time.
Yeah.
So try and cut those angles. But at the same time, Buddy's greatness was also because of the people further up the field. So I knew that Sam Mitchell could kick left foot, right foot. He preferred to kick it sort of up to 30 metres. He didn't really want to kick it beyond that. But either side, I knew that Cyril was always left foot, but he was a left footer that usually as a left footer, they can only kick there. But he had this hook kick that he could kick back the other way. So you had to be aware of that. Jared Ruffhead was very up straight, and he'd be in a straight line. So he'd always be on that angle there. Luke Hodge liked to kick it up beyond that 30, 40 metres out in the space and put the player onto it. So knowing all these things, Michael Osborne, he didn't tend to go to his left side much. He tended to go to his right side more. So knowing all those little things and understanding how the ball would come down was just me knowing I had to stand on that side of him or that side of him or in front of him or behind, whatever it was, because I'm trying to get a few percentages back in my favour. So I guess that was part of every team. We'd go through it and try and do it for as many teams as I could, look at how they entered inside 50, looked at where they kicked their goals from and where they missed their goals, so we could get that type of level of stats. So you could actually go, righto, if we, like Geelong were always very straight and central, so if you could try and get them to take a shot from goal outside of that, then you've taken a few percentages off the chances of them kicking a goal. And it's not a perfect science, it's just, it's us against you, it's me against him in every moment. So how can I get a few more percentages back in my favour?
Yeah. So in your mind, it's absolutely the case that your success is as a result of some of the hard work and the pre-planning that you did prior to taking them on, and sort of there's a talent in being able to do that, don't you think?
Yeah, and that's sort of tied into what I said earlier about I was never nervous for a game because I'd done the work. So if I just showed up and just went and walked down next to Buddy Franklin and didn't know all that about how the ball was going to come in, then I haven't done all the work. So then I would get nervous because then I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know how it's going to come out. I don't know where they like to kick it. I don't know how he likes to mark the ball and where he likes to lead. Like Buddy would, when you're on a lead with him, he'd give you a forearm and push you off about 5 metres before he got there and just take a chest mark. So he didn't take, Travis Cloak, who was a teammate of mine, he wouldn't do that early contact and it'd just be a contested mark almost every time. But his hands were so bloody strong that worked for him. He didn't have to do the push off. So understanding that push off, like watching the ball where it's coming from and knowing where Buddy was that's about to come and trying to either knock it out of the way and make body contact, like little things like that. And again, I only played on him that one time. I won more one-on-ones that I lost in review with my coach, the backs coach. I got a vote in the best and fairest for how I performed, and Buddy kicked 8.
Yep.
He kicked 8 goals. So if you actually go back and go, well, he kicked 8 goals, that's an enormous failure. And people from the outside looking at that would go, enormous failure. But they had 70 inside 50s or something on that night. Like the ball was down there a lot. There was no pressure on it. And sitting with my coach and going through every single play that I was involved in, what would you have done differently? For the goals he kicked, I wouldn't have done anything differently. I couldn't have done anything differently.
So translating it to business, like, sometimes there are external factors that are outside of our control that impact the business, and you could do everything in your power to circumvent it, but it just doesn't. Sometimes it just doesn't happen. And so if you've done the hard work in the back end, you can rest easy, even though it's not fun to go through, that you've done everything you can.
And I think that comes down to your reviewing. So I go back to sport. On a Monday, there's 5 reviews taking on. So the reviews for 2 hours. So you see 2 hours of the week, which is on TV in a game of AFL footy, but there's hundreds of hours of work that's gone into those 2 hours. So you get to a Monday, the coaches are all reviewing together for a couple of hours. The leadership group is reviewing together. You review every single play that you're involved in with your divisional coach. Your division as a backs and mids or forwards, they do a review together, and then the whole team reviews together. So that's 5 reviews, that's a whole day, that's a fifth of your week, 20% of your week is done just reviewing the 2 hours the week before. So you go back to business and you go, right, well, how often do we review? Most often the answer is half yearly or quarterly is our reviews. And that's where people go, I say to young managers, so what's the toughest thing you're going through? Having tough conversations. I go, why are they tough conversations? And they go, oh, it's hard to tell people when they're not doing a good job or whatever it is. And I said, but if you're having those conversations every single day about your performance and where you're at and what you're working on and stuff, it shouldn't be hard. Like people know, they should be able to understand exactly where they're at every single day. So we knew where we were at as a player. We knew we were about a coaching group. Our defenders knew where we were at. If we'd put in a poor performance, that as a group, that wasn't good enough. We need to be better. What are we going to do about it? So
and so it's integrating that culture of feedback on an on the ground daily basis, rather than this sort of idea of like periodically we're going to check in. It seems to be in between those periods, there's like an avoidance of conversation, and that's why it makes it hard, right?
Correct, and the thing that adds another layer to it is that we've got WhatsApp groups, and we've got emails, and we've got all these different ways that we converse with each other amongst our teams. But if I write something in a WhatsApp group or I write something in an email, tone isn't conveyed. Yeah. So often it's taken the wrong way. So for me, I try to either do it in person or on the phone as much as I can, so they understand context and they understand the tone that I'm coming at it with. Because if you just write it down, I can take that a million different ways.
That's old school, Nick. That's very old school.
It is. We use WhatsApp and we use use our apps. We do all that, but ultimately, we can get caught up in, and it also becomes really lazy, I feel, because if you're going to provide feedback to me, I want to look you in the eye and do it. I don't want you sending me an email at 11 o'clock at night about things that are on your mind when I don't know what type of a frame of mind you're in at the time of doing it, what frustrations you've just had. You can't get the kids to bed, so you're feeling angry and frustrated, and then you pile off an email. So it's like the old never go on social media or send an email when you've had a few drinks, because you're going to send something that you shouldn't be sending.
Yeah, we've seen that a few times at AFL land, haven't we?
Too many times.
Yeah. So just to finalise, what's keeping you busy at the moment with ECLAT? You can maybe just describe the business itself a little bit and what you're doing. Yeah,
we've opened up at the moment in Hawthorn East. So we've got 52 serviced offices, as well as Zoom rooms, phone rooms, etc. As you can see behind me, that's our entry. So it's a hotel style fit out. We want to be able to offer something so people who come here, they don't feel like they're going to an office. We want them to feel like they're going to a hotel. So it's a really high standard of finish. Anyone can do that in reality. You can throw money at something and make it look sexy. So for us, what brings it back together is our technology. So we built our own app to make everything seamless for people and be able to work through everything they need in their day-to-day. And then the other thing's our people. So I've also got on site members only bar, restaurant, cafe, dining room, podcast studio, event space. And we run events every Thursday night for our members, basically, where we put it on from 6 till 8. We put on the food, the drink and the entertainment. And we've had, over the last sort of few weeks, leadership chats. We've had a beauty and fashion blogger talking about her experiences and what's going on in the industry. We've got a criminologist coming up. We've got oyster tastings with paired wines. So just different things all the time for our members and for their employees to be able to experience different things. And we know as an employer how hard it is you obviously want to do your job. You want to look at the bottom line. You don't have to worry about all the team building stuff that go with it. So we want to be able to support people by bringing them through and being able to answer a lot of those questions on behalf of the employer by helping with the culture stuff, helping provide opportunities and entertainment. So ECLAT is something that has been in our minds, our founders, Jesse Hayes and myself, for about 8.5 years. And then it sort of came to life with our other director, Paul, over the last sort of 18 months, and then opened up over the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks. So something that we're really proud of. We're building a great team, and as I said, I'm back on the rookie list, so we've got to prove ourselves, mate. We've got to work our way through. And
I hope you don't get as many knockbacks in or maybe you like that. I don't know. You seem like a sucker for punishment.
No, we're going to make sure that we're going to get Plan A right, because Plan B isn't looking as sexy as Plan A at the moment.
Well, this has been chock full of insights, Nick. I've really enjoyed it at a personal level. I've learnt a lot from your experiences, and at the end, I think the original comment that I make is that it's easy to kind of talk about all your accolades without actually showing the hard work that you've gone through to get there. And it's been an honor and a privilege to run through that with you. It would be remiss of me not to ask you as an end question, which usually stumps many, what your spirit animal would be and why.
Oh, jeez, a spirit animal.
Yeah.
I'm going to say an ant.
An ant. All right.
Yeah. And the reason would be, having never put any thought into it, I've never been asked that question.
Yes.
It's just, I'm just part of the team. I'm part of the team, and sometimes I have to carry more load than others, and sometimes others have to carry more load than me. But unless we're all working together, we'll never be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So I'm just a cog in the wheel, and that's my goal, is to be part of the team and work with my team and contribute as much as everyone else. Wow,
that's a fantastic answer. And as a man with an Egyptian heritage, thinking that we built the pyramids in the past, that sounds That sounds great. I agree with the sentiments.
Appreciate it, mate.
Well, look, thanks again. Appreciate it. And this is going to be dropped very soon. And yeah, thanks for your time.
All good, mate. Appreciate it, Joe.
Good on you.
I hope that this one was enjoyable to listen to and there were some moments of value. If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.